Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 6th. I hope everybody had a great weekend. The final weekend of football has officially come and gone. We're going to make sure we go over everything to do with the NFL, our final power rankings. We'll go through a tier list of every single playoff team. We will talk about Tyreek Hill. It is, of course, a national holiday in the NFL. Black Monday, the day where coaches figure out their future in the league. It was a relatively quiet one. We'll talk about all of that, and of course, a little bit of MLB news as we head into the off-season, getting towards the end of it. Pitchers and catchers report in about a month. A couple big free agents still left hanging around. We'll talk about that and more in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 6th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of NFL football here to start off the day. Black Monday is here. Black Monday, of course, what is referred to in the NFL as the day that most coaches find out whether or not they are still in the running to be a head coach in the NFL. We had just two coaches fired today, that being Jeremy Mayo, who actually was fired yesterday, and Doug Peterson. That goes along with three other head coaches who were fired earlier on in the NFL season, giving us 5 open slots at the head coaching position in the NFL. I want to talk about the coaches that did get fired, and I do want to get into the ones that didn't as well, because it was much more of a restrained kind of coaching cycle this year in the NFL. We're going to talk a little bit about Doug Peterson first, because that one's pretty cut and dry. That was a guy that I did not expect to get through the season. He made it through with the Jaguars. I thought he would get fired after their abysmal start to the year. Everything was going wrong in London. I didn't think he'd make that return flight home about halfway through the year. He ends up making it all the way through the year. They, again, get a top 10 pick. It's just not working out the way that they thought it was going to after that one playoff win that they were able to get under Doug Peterson earlier in his tenure. They're going to go out and find a new head coach, but the more interesting one, and the one that I really wanted to focus on, is, of course, Jeremy Mayo. Jeremy Mayo, now former head coach of the New England Patriots, was let go after just one season, and generally right there, that is a bit of an issue. You don't generally see one-and-dones happen that much in the NFL. It comes with its own special context, right? This is the guy that was hand-selected to be the successor to one of, if not the greatest coaches in the history of the NFL in Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, who, of course, now has that job coaching at UNC Chapel Hill. They went out and they said, Jeremy Mayo, you're the guy. Former linebacker, has been on the coaching staff for a little while. Players seem to like him, and he is one and done. This was something that was premeditated. I've seen a lot of theories about whether or not this firing was done because potentially we have a guy that lost them the number 1 overall pick, right? And you can't say that, right? It's not a fair assessment to say that they fired him because they won a game. The first overall pick to them, being completely honest, probably doesn't matter all that much. Now, I know they fall a little further back in the draft order than a typical one loss would, especially when you already had that number 1 overall pick to begin with. But when you're taking a look at the NFL this season, especially with how many teams were in the doldrums or at the bottom, we have 15 teams, an NFL record 15 teams that won 10 games or more, which is going to leave a lot more teams at the bottom of the league. 4 wins, 5 wins, lots of those sitting around the NFL as we head into next season. But the Patriots fall. And Jeremy Mayo gets fired. This is one of those things that it came really quickly after the game. Came an hour after the game. They had a whole statement prepared. Robert Kraft and the whole Kraft family came and said that that situation was just not a good situation to be a coach in, which makes me wonder even more why they decided to fire him, because that is the biggest thing, right? Everyone knew this is a Patriots team that was not going to go very far this season. The success or failure rate for this Patriots team this season was whether or not the quarterback that they drafted in Drake May was going to be the long-term answer. And seemingly he is the long-term answer, right? You take a look at what he's been able to do this season. I think unquestionably he has shown himself to be a franchise quarterback, which makes this Patriots season a success. You can look at it a lot of other ways. I also personally liked what I saw out of Joe Milton on Sunday. Not someone that I expect to be a long-term answer in New England, but he's a guy that could be an interesting kind of backup piece. You don't need that bridge quarterback anymore. When you brought in Jacoby Brissett, Joe Milton showed me a lot. I was very impressed with what he was able to do against, granted, a second unit Bills team, but still his accuracy and his athleticism is something that was really impressive to see. Gerard Mayo, no longer the head coach of the New England Patriots, was a shocking move. I'm not going to sit here and say that people didn't see it coming, right? There were rumblings all season long of Gerard Mayo potentially getting fired, but one and done with a team with zero expectations and a team that, in my opinion at least, had a successful season. And then going on to fire a coach, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, a lot of people say they're going to go out and get a guy like Mike Vrabel. Maybe they just decided they wanted him more. And in that case, that just sucks. You weren't going to be able to get anything. They apologized for how they handled that situation, which is never a good sign for the organization, right? It shows that, hey, we know we did something wrong, but we're just going to go with it anyway. All signs seem to point to Mike Vrabel, who's an experienced head coach, but he's a guy that, very similarly to Gerard Mayo, was a former player for the New England Patriots, is a player's coach. He isn't going to go out there and give you this creative scheme like a Sean McVay would do. Now, this is not official at all. They're still going to go through the process, go through the interviews, and get everybody that, might be interested or they might be interested in, but all the rumors are this is Mike Vrabel's job to lose. So we'll see what happens over there. But I think a little bit more interestingly, actually, in this coaching cycle was the coaches that didn't get fired. There were a lot of coaches that I think could have gotten fired that instead were held onto. Case in point, the one for the New York Giants, Brian Daboll. Both him and Joe Schoen stay on as GM and head coach. This is coming off of a Giants season that was an undoubtable failure, right? They had one more year. Daniel Jones had one more year to prove that he was the guy, that he was someone that they could build around long term. Everything fell apart. They lose that number one overall pick as well. The locker room at certain times seems not too happy with Brian Daboll and some of his decisions. Now, personally, I like this decision. As a Giants fan and what Brian Daboll has been able to do, drawing up schemes with the team that he has been given, I'm very impressed with what he has been able to do. Now, again, a 4-win season, it's not great. I'm not going to sit here and go, oh my God, we got 4 wins on a season. We got 3 wins on a season. I can't wait to bring it back. He's definitely on the hot seat, but this is a guy that won Coach of the Year just a couple of seasons ago, and his offensive system is something that I think we need to be able to let ride a little bit. You need him to be able to get his quarterback in. People forget him and Joe Schoen were brought in after Daniel Jones was already in the system. They were given Daniel Jones and said, hey, work with this. Now they get a chance to restart, build the way that they want to, and that's not necessarily going to be with them going out and getting a quarterback in this draft. This is a quarterback draft that, honestly, not very good, and that'll be a big discussion of later, of much later in the offseason as we get to the offseason and mock draft season. But he's not the only coach not to get fired. The Colts said they were going to make big changes. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard both stay on. Instead, it's the defensive coordinator that gets fired. Something had to get changed. The culture in that locker room is bad. A lot of reports are. I'm not sure what the Colts are going to do. They're about to hit the reset button. But my hot take here, and this is one that I didn't see a lot of people talking about. This is one that I've felt for a while, is the fact that Zach Taylor, head coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, needs to be fired. That is my hot take here. Zach Taylor does not deserve to be an NFL head coach. And sure, he's had his success. He has Joe Burrow. He has Jamar Chase. He has the pieces, especially offensively, to win football games. They did go out and fire Lou Amarillo, who was their defensive coordinator, but every single season with the Bengals, year in and year out, ever since Zach Taylor has taken over, the first 4 weeks of the season, they go 1-3, 0-4. Every single time, and that is on the head coach. This is a pattern at this point. As good as Joe Burrow is, as good as T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and that offense is, as good as that defense has been in years past, they have consistently started slow. Zach Taylor was never in any danger of getting fired. At least it didn't feel like he was in any danger of getting fired. But this is a guy that consistently starts off his season slow, puts them in a position where they have to dig out of a hole, go on these big winning streaks down the stretch of a season to get into playoff contention, and especially against a tough division like the AFC North. The Bengals can't continue to put themselves in that stranglehold, that chokehold of starting 1-3, starting 0-4 like they do every single year. Zach Taylor, I think, should be fired. But that's my hot take there. Let me know what you think. Did all the right coaches get fired, get kept on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break as we finish off this Black Monday in the NFL. We turn our attention to some player rumors. Tyreek Hill, after missing the playoffs for the first time in his career, has come out with some comments saying he wants out of Miami. We'll talk about that situation and everything going on with him coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replace all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 6th. I hope everybody is having a good day. I have some snow over here. But if you're just tuning in, we just finished going over Black Monday, the national holiday in the NFL. I guess less of a holiday, less of a celebratory day, and more of a day of reflection. Coaches get fired a lot on Black Monday, the Monday after Game 272 on the NFL calendar. In this segment, we continue our ride around the NFL as the regular season wrapped up. We're going to take a look at some comments surrounding star wide receiver Tyreek Hill. He says he wants out of Miami. We're going to talk about what that means for him, for the Dolphins, and if anything is ever going to come of this situation. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 6th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some more news surrounding one of the best receivers in all of the NFL. Tyreek Hill left Kansas City. He left Patrick Mahomes. He wanted out because he wanted his big payday. He got traded to Miami for quite the haul. and came up as one of the best receivers in all the NFL last season, putting up a near historic almost 2,000-yard season, falling just short of that milestone down the stretch of the year. This year, not nearly as productive, finishing at just 56 yards per game, by far his worst statistical year of the season. And I'm not going to say it's all on him, right? That would be completely unfair of me to say, because he had to deal with the worst quarterback situation of his entire career, right? When he had Tua, granted, it still wasn't as good as it had been in seasons past, but it was still a lot better than guys like Tyler Huntley not throwing him the ball. Guys like Tim Boyle, who, as you know, if you've been watching my show, I don't have the best feelings for Tim Boyle. He's not giving him the ball consistently. Skylar Thompson not giving him the ball consistently. It was just not a great season for Miami in general. And all of it kind of went down when Tua went down. That's how it goes sometimes. But Tyreek Hill saying he wants out, it's an emotional reaction. The bigger deal for me, aside from that press conference, is the fact that Tyreek Hill pulled himself out of the game. Now, we have seen this happen at least once this season. Linebacker for the 49ers, Devondre Campbell, pulled himself out of a football game in the second half, a game that they desperately needed to win to stay in playoff contention. They pulled himself out. He got suspended. That is not something you can do. That is giving up on your team. And I've heard a lot of different reactions to this. Oh, it's Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel doesn't have control of that locker room. Tyreek Hill wants out, and I understand. They were losing that game to the Jets. The Broncos were absolutely destroying the Chiefs, which that's kind of their saving grace there. He knew what was going on, and he is missing the playoffs for the first time in his career. Now, he has been in a lot of very successful places, right? He comes from Kansas City, goes down to the high-flying, high-powered offense of the Miami Dolphins. Still, though, this is an unacceptable way. We can't just look over this. We had so much coming out against Devondre Campbell earlier this season. It needs to be treated the same way. Not just that, but he changed his profile picture on social media to that picture of Antonio Brown shirtless, running off the field, basically his parting retirement ceremony. Now, this isn't the first time that we have kind of hinted at or heard of Tyreek Hill wanting to retire from the NFL. He said on multiple occasions he's going to retire once his contract is up with the Dolphins. Now, it got re-upped. They gave him new money. He got big money contract, and then they gave him more money this offseason. They didn't give him more term, just more money. Now he wants out. And again, like I said, for a guy that's never missed the playoffs in his career, it seems like an emotional outburst. He doesn't know how to handle it. This season is over early. But this is an unacceptable response, right? This is not something that you can go out and say, oh, it's fine, he's a star. And I think we're kind of getting caught up in that. I haven't seen a lot of reactions the same way that we saw to Devondre Campbell saying, oh, get him out of the league, right? And I'm not advocating for Tyreek Hill to get out of the league. But this is something that needs to be very much paid attention to when teams are trying to trade for him, right? This seems to me, hey, I miss Patrick Mahomes. I miss being successful with the Chiefs, right? I miss winning games. And that's a fine reaction. And you can say that, honestly, right? It's not a big deal if you say, hey, I want to win games again. I want out because we're not winning games. That in and itself, the fact that he wants out of Miami in itself is a whole nother issue. And it's something that I'm not even mad at, right? Players want to leave for many different reasons, whether it be money, whether it be success, whether it be just they're not happy in the city that they're in, or maybe they want to go play somewhere else. I'm not mad at the fact that he wants out. I'm mad at how he handled the end of the season. You had a quarter and a half to go. You just had to put a quarter and a half more on the field to play for Miami, a team that you desperately wanted to go to, a city that you live in, your family lives in, something that you just couldn't give. And at that point, it becomes a little bit unacceptable, right? Tyreek Hill, for as good of a player as he is, and just because he has a down season, doesn't mean he's done. He's got a season or two left in him, and I'm not even convinced that he's going to retire once his contract is done. He's got about a year or two left on his contract now. Depending where he goes, he might re-up with them, play till the end of that contract. But it's going to be a very interesting offseason surrounding Tyreek Hill. I'm not sure exactly how this situation is going to resolve, but it seems like around Miami, he has played his last snap there. And honestly, if he wants out and he's going to disrespect the team like that by not playing in the final quarter, just walking off to the locker room like that, good riddance if I'm Miami, honestly. But we'll see how it gets handled at the end of the day. I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you handle the Tyreek Hill situation? I'm not letting him back in the building, but that's just me. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL Power Rankings, the final NFL Power Rankings. We have gone through the preseason, weeks 1 to 18, and now we have our final end of season Power Rankings. We will go 32 to 1, talk about every single team coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 6th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the Tyreek Hill situation. He walked off the field and now wants out of the Miami Dolphins organization. In this segment, we turn our attention to a broader view of the NFL, the final NFL Power Rankings, 32 to 1, coming up in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 6th. But like I was saying, getting into our final full NFL Power Rankings for the season, we have 32 to 1. Starting off at number 32, it's the Cleveland Browns. They finished the year just in a miserable state. A new starting quarterback to add to that jersey that keeps on growing now. Bailey Zappi takes a turn on the list, and it's gone just about as good as just about everyone else there. They hold on to everybody. Deshaun Watson suffered yet another setback on his Achilles injury. Probably a good thing. They're going to be in the market for a new quarterback, with the Cleveland Browns start off the final NFL Power Rankings at the bottom of the league at number 32. At 31, we have the New York Giants, right? This is a Giants team that has some promise to it, right? They have the rookies, Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy. The offensive line needs a lot of work. They obviously need a quarterback, a couple of good defensive players, also young. Andrew Phillips. You have Tyler Nubin. Those two secondary pieces, obviously, that whole front four is pretty good in New York when healthy. This is just a team that did not get anything to click at all. And they're a lot of pieces away, but you can start to see a little bit of a vision with this team heading into next season. But for now, Giants need something quarterback pretty badly. They're at 31. At 30, we have the Tennessee Titans. The team that holds the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft this year is at number 30. The Tennessee Titans go out there and they just had a bad game. But again, like I've been saying all season, this is a Titans team that has some talent on its roster. This is not a talented roster that, if they get the right quarterback in there, is going to pull what Washington did. But honestly, they're not too far off, right? You have a couple of solid running backs. The offensive line isn't completely garbage, and when healthy, that defense was a top 10 defense in the league this year. Now, everything kind of went wrong with them because the quarterback situation just was not the right answer, and there's no getting around that. They need to get a new quarterback if they want to be any kind of successful heading into the future. But the Tennessee Titans are not the worst team in the league, regardless of having the number one overall pick. Number 29, we have the Saints. This is a team that is very, very dangerously bad, right? We've seen them be sort of competitive with Derek Carr at the helm, but right now what the Saints need to be is they need to be complete trash because they have way too little cap space to do anything to make themselves better. They don't have too many great draft picks. They need to hit on their draft picks. Otherwise, they're going to be bad for a very, very long time. And I'm worried we're about to hit a time in New Orleans football that is back before the Drew Brees era when they were consistently one of the worst teams in football. I kind of see that on the horizon. They stressed out this competition window, this competitive window a little bit too far, and now they're falling back into their habits of just being a bad team. The Saints are at 29. The Jags here at 28. I mean, again, I guess we're getting to around the territory of best of the worst, but this is still really, really bad. Really, any of these bottom 5 teams, bottom 6 teams in the NFL are just awful, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars with Mac Jones at the helm showed a little bit of promise, especially with rookie wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. This was not the season they were expecting. This is a failure of a year for them, but they do have a couple pieces to build around, and I look forward to see what they can do, hopefully with a healthy Trevor Lawrence going forward. At 27, we have the Raiders. Brock Bowers is amazing. The rest of this team, not so much. We're here in this category of teams that desperately need a quarterback, right? Browns, Giants, Titans, Saints, Jaguars, Raiders, all of these teams desperately need quarterbacks. They are going to be in the market for a quarterback draft that really only has 2, maybe 3, 1 in my opinion, first-round options, real first-round options. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm curious which one of these teams is going to shell out $45 to $50 million for a guy like Sam Darnold after what he did on the Vikings this year. Bears at 26, a huge win for them over the Packers, and this wasn't just one of those weird Week 18 wins where the other team was resting their starters. The Packers were trying in this game. This was their first win in 11 games against the Packers. Their first win, they snap a 10-game win streak, just straight up. The Bears needed that one badly. They get the 2025 year off to a good start, and hopefully that can reverse whatever curse was put upon them when they gave up that Hail Mary in Washington. I think Caleb Williams has the ability to be better. He had a rough season, but I think this is a Bears team that has a lot of talent and can continue to grow from what they had this year. At 25, we have the Patriots. Joe Milton looked really good. They fired Gerard Mayo. They have their quarterback of the future. They have a top 5 draft pick. This is exactly what they wanted. Not exactly. They obviously wanted that number 1 overall pick, but it doesn't matter as much to them because they already have their quarterback. In fact, they potentially have 2 quarterback options there. I'm curious what the conversation surrounding Joe Milton in the offseason is going to be. Maybe one of these 6 teams that we just went over would be interested in trading for him with his physical tools and his accuracy. That's a guy that might be on the trade market. Might not be too bad of an option for a team like potentially the Giants or the Jaguars that don't have one of those top 2 picks in the NFL draft that could use a quarterback. At 24, we have the Colts. Anthony Richardson and that whole season was just weird, right? Everything with this Colts team that could have gone wrong didn't really go wrong, but there were just bad vibes around this team all year long. Anthony Richardson could not quite figure it out, and with the way that the Colts benched him halfway through the year and the way that he was talked about, his leadership style not being super well received, not being super well liked in the locker room, I don't know if the Colts know what they're doing with him. And this is kind of a pivot point, right? He's been in the league for 2 years now. Granted, he's been injured for half of his time in the league. He's sat out of 16 of his 34 potential games that he could have played in. So he's only played one full season, and he's had his ups and downs, right? I've talked a lot about Anthony Richardson, how much I love his potential, but it's time to start really making those decisions, and I'm not sure if they're really going to go forward with him. It's going to be a really interesting offseason in Indianapolis. Carolina Panthers at 23, they found their guy. How about that? Bryce Young looking like that number 1 overall pick, Heisman winner. 5 total touchdowns for him in the final game in an incredible duel between them and the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, they end up ending their season on a high note, and this is a team that has a lot of momentum heading into 2025. They figured out their quarterback situation. They figured out their running back situation. They figured out their head coach situation. Now they just need to get some more pieces, especially defensively, and this is one of those teams that if they are smart in free agency, could make a huge leap in 2025. 22, we have the Cowboys, a team that has all the talent, right? You look up and down that roster, and the names that pop out to you on paper are just amazing. But this was a failure of a season by every possible metric, right? Injuries, wins, not making the playoffs. This was just a bad Cowboys year. They continue to sit around the 20s. They almost beat the Washington Commanders. They end up giving up a last-second touchdown to Marcus Mariota. This was just a bad year for them, and I don't really know what they're going to do going forward. Jets at 21, and the big question surrounding them is around Aaron Rodgers, right? Is he done? Has he played his last snap in the NFL? And if not, is he coming back to the Jets? Are the Jets done with him? He said that he'd like to play for the Jets if they would have him back, and that's something that the new head coach, new GM need to figure out. Whether or not keeping him is the right answer. Now, will he play somewhere else if the Jets decide ultimately not to keep him? I bet he will. I think he's got at least one more season left. He did sign that extension at the end of last season. I believe he's got 1 year left on that deal, so we'll see what happens. But Aaron Rodgers, I don't think is done. He just threw his 500th touchdown of his career, which is incredible. What he's done, don't let it get diluted by this last season and how atrocious it was. He's still going to be an undisputed first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game of football. But that's the big question surrounding the Jets in a sea of chaos right now. At 20, we have the Niners. Another quarterback question for them. What are they going to do with Brock Purdy, right? This San Francisco 49ers team had a season from hell, really, right? This is a team that dealt with every single injury under the sun, off the field issues, on the field issues, players quitting on them in the middle of games, running backs going back to that running back curse that Kyle Shanahan seems to put on all of his running backs, right? They went through 4 running backs this year. It's just going to be what I'm sure they'll reload, right? But they need to figure out what they're doing with Brock Purdy because he's asking for 50 to 60 million. I don't know if he's really do that. Kyle Shanahan's been successful with just about every quarterback that he's laid his hands on. I wonder if they take another shot in the barrel at another late round quarterback or potentially a veteran, a guy that kind of didn't work out, sort of like a Sam Darnold situation. We'll see though. Heading into the top 20, we have the Miami Dolphins. We talked a lot about Tyreek Hill earlier on in the program, so I'm not going to harp too much about him, but really the question is, what does the future look like in Miami, right? And that's a very broad question, but Tua, he clearly is the guy that they want, but how long is he going to play? Is he going to get hurt again? And what is your backup plan? They've been incredibly unable to deal with a Tua injury. They've only won 1 game with a backup quarterback in all of Mike McDaniel's tenure. They need to find an answer at backup quarterback, someone that they can trust in case Tua goes down yet again. This is a Dolphins team that is kind of in no man's land and purgatory right now, and we will see. They can reload pretty easily, but they could also completely blow it up super easy. This is going to be a really interesting offseason, and they're one of those teams, like the Colts, that I'm going to have a strict eye on as we head down the stretch. Falcons at 18, they don't have too many questions, honestly. The biggest one is just, what are they going to do with Kirk Cousins? Are they going to let him go? Or are they going to keep him as an expensive mentor, but seemingly Michael Penix has been the answer. Now they're 0-2 I guess 1-2 in the games that he started, 0-2 in his last two games, but he has led them to game-tying, game-winning drives in both of them and has led to incredible quarterback duels versus Bryce Young and Jaden Daniels. He seems to be the answer. He's starting to get more on the same page with guys like Drake London. I think this is an Atlanta Falcons team that the sky is the limit for them as long as Penix is at quarterback. 17, we have the Cards. Again, this is just a team that's in the middle of a rebuild, right? They took a huge step up this year. That defense was incredible. I'd like to see a little bit more out of Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. They didn't quite have the best connection, but that'll get better. As long as that improves in the offseason, they're on the right track. At 16, it's the Houston Texans, the first playoff team on our list and really one that's limping their way in. They get a big win at the end of the season against the Tennessee Titans to give them a little bit of momentum as they host another playoff game this year, but CJ Stroud has been going through a bit of a sophomore slump. Really, everything on this team has been down, and that offensive line is just atrocious, going up against a good Chargers pass rush, as we'll talk about later on in the week. It's going to be a little bit tough for them. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. Seahawks at 15, they are actually the first team out of the playoffs at 10-7. It was just a shame. They end up missing the postseason because of strength of record, strength of schedule, one of those tiebreakers that's kind of further down the list. Geno Smith hit all of incentives. I'm curious what that roster looks like because there's some rumors surrounding Tyler Lockett, whether or not he comes back. We saw the emergence of JSN and kind of DK Metcalf taking a little bit of a back seat to some of those other receivers. I'm curious what's going to happen with Zach Charbonnet. He took a big step up, and Kenny Walker. Which one of those guys is going to have a bigger season next year? There's a lot of questions around the Seahawks, but I think they're going in the right direction, and I think they have a lot to look forward to next season. Steelers at 14, another playoff team here. The Steelers have been skidding as of late. They just have not had the answers. The offense has been really, really bad. The defense looked really good against a high-powered Bengals offense. They were able to hold them to just 19 points on the day, which is incredible, really. But this is just typical Pittsburgh Steelers, right? They get that winning record, they get into the playoffs, and now they have to play an opponent that is just honestly much better than them. They draw the Ravens this year, and it is a division game, so anything can happen. But I'm just not too excited. I don't really believe in this Pittsburgh Steelers team going forward. There's a lot of questions, especially at the quarterback position with this team. Bengals at 13. They were oh so close to scratching and clawing their way back into the playoffs. My big takeaway for this team is they need to fire Zach Taylor. I talked about it in our first segment. He continuously gets this team off to slow starts, and if they had just won one more game in the first 4 games of their season, they'd probably be in the playoffs right now. It'd be a much different story. We'd talking much differently about this team. Instead, they're going home, they're heading on vacation, and the Bengals are getting prepared for next season where they need to figure out how to re-sign both of their star receivers and fix that defense. At 12, we have the Los Angeles Rams. They get themselves into the playoffs, and they're a very dangerous team right now. This is a team that started off 1-4, finished at 10-7, and that is incredibly impressive. Finishing at 9-3 down the stretch of the season, the Los Angeles Rams have a lot to play for. They're going for their second title in the last few years. I'm not sure if they can do it, but they're a very dangerous team if you let them get hot. Broncos at 11, they get a huge win. Bo Nix sets the rookie record for touchdown passes by a rookie quarterback, right? That is crazy. He's a guy that I honestly don't believe too much in. He reminds me of Mac Jones a little bit. His rookie season, he leads the Patriots with a legendary coach to the playoffs. Patriots lose in the first round. Then Mac Jones falls off a cliff. I don't know if it's going to be such a dramatic fall off for Bo Nix, but I'm getting a lot of the same kind of vibes between Bo Nix and Mac Jones. I'm just not too optimistic about the Broncos' future. Heading into the top 10, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I don't want to talk about their future right now. They're in the playoffs. I want to talk about what took place at the end of that game. One of the coolest things I have ever seen on a football field. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers needed Mike Evans to have just 5 more yards. They get the ball back with 30 seconds left, and instead of just taking a knee and claiming their playoff spot, they run a little 5-yard out. He ends up picking up 9 yards and securing his 11th straight, all 11 years of his career. 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons, tying Jerry Rice, the first player in the history of the NFL to do it in his first 11 seasons. He's a future Hall of Famer, and I thought that was super cool for the Bucs to give him that shot, give him that extra play. Everybody knew it. Everyone in the stadium knew it. It was an excellent way to walk off the year. They head into the playoffs, a rematch of Week 1 when they took down Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. That's going to be a good game. At number 9, we have the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson goes down for the year, torn ACL. Sucks because he is such a huge part of that offense. We talk about this Green Bay Packers team all the time. They struggle with some of the better teams. They just lost to the Bears for the first time in 11 games. This was not a good look for them. They were trying. Losing Christian Watson, though, I think is going to be a huge blow to this offense, right? You have a lot of different receivers, 5 or 6 guys that have made big contributions over the course of this year, but Christian Watson has been the big play guy. He's averaging 21.4 yards per reception that he's had, and he hasn't had his most explosive season. He had that one year where he was catching a touchdown every single time he touched it, but still, 20 yards a pop is nothing to scoff at. Your big play guy that stretches the field, his contested catches, a guy like Jordan Love loves to have a guy like that, and losing him in the playoffs is going to be a huge blow. I'm curious how the Packers respond. At 8, we have the Chargers. Ladd McConkey stepped up. He's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. They get a huge win all the way up to the 5 seed. They get a favorable matchup, granted on the road, against the Houston Texans. That's what they wanted. Justin Herbert's going to need to prove he can perform in the playoffs. I believe in Justin Herbert. I think he's a great quarterback, but taking a look at the rest of these roster, it's very young, unproven. Jim Harbaugh has done an excellent job turning this team from a 5-win team all the way to an 11-win team this season. That is incredibly impressive for what they've done. Chargers at number 8. 7, we have the Commanders. Terry McLaurin sets the all-time franchise record for touchdowns in a single season with this game-winning catch, mossing Deron Bland in the corner of the end zone. They weren't able to get a lot of offense going with Jaden Daniels. Marcus Mariota comes in, provides a spark. This is a very young team. I don't know if this is their year, but they have been incredibly impressive. They have impressed me in every possible way, and Jaden Daniels is your Rookie of the Year. The Minnesota Vikings at 6. I was very disappointed by the way they played against the Lions. And I know it was the Lions, but this has been my big concern with this Vikings team all season long. We saw Sam Darnold kind of get shell-shocked, right? He was missing these throws that he had not missed all season. That was a real playoff atmosphere. He hadn't had to deal with that all season long. And as we get into the playoffs, those atmospheres, especially in an NFC where the lowest amount of wins in that playoffs is 10 games. They're going into the Rams, a Rams team that, while they only have 10 wins, is 9-3 over their last 12, right? They started 1-4 ever since they got healthy. They have been really hard to stop. It's going to be a tough game. This defense for the Vikings is really good, but Sam Darnold needs to be able to hit those open receivers, something he was failing to do at the end of that really all Sunday Night Football long in one of the biggest games of the year. At 5, we have the Ravens. They find their way back into the top 5, and they're playing their best football right now, right? This is an incredibly dangerous team. The defense is starting to figure it out, and that was one of their big weaknesses. Derrick Henry. He's doing Derrick Henry things, setting records, doing everything he possibly could think of. Lamar Jackson playing at an MVP caliber level, right? This is a Baltimore Ravens team that is hungry for a Super Bowl. They were so close last year. I wonder if this is their year. They're going to, again, just like everyone else in the AFC, their goal is to get over the hump, the monkey on all of their backs that is the Kansas City Chiefs, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, they just gave up. Right, they didn't play that last game. They finish at 15-2. They're going to they're looking to attempt to three-peat. If they do it successfully, it would be the first time in the Super Bowl era that any team has ever done that. Now, they looked atrocious against the Broncos, but that's because everybody that you have heard of on that team was resting. I don't blame them too much for it. It's crazy that they get 23 or 24 days off before their next game. It's going to be a long time, and they need it. Patrick Mahomes dealt with a little bit of that ankle injury. I don't think he was 100%, but they have gotten better and better as time has gone on. In 3 of their last 4 games, aside from the game where they sat everybody, in their last 3 games, they've won by double digits, something they had only done 2 times prior all season long. Everything is starting to click for this team. They're getting very dangerous and very hot at the right time. Getting into the top 3 of Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills here at number 3, they had a great season. MVP potential in Josh Allen. He's probably going to end up winning the award, but this Bills team has really impressed me, right? The defense has been a lot better than I thought it was going to be after siphoning off all the talent that it has. The offense as well also looked a lot better than I thought it was going to after siphoning off the talent. They had 30 rushing touchdowns, 30 passing touchdowns, something no other team in the history of the league has ever done before. That's incredibly impressive. This is a very dangerous team, and much like the Ravens, they're looking to get that Chiefs monkey off of their back. That's how we'll know if it's a successful year for either of them. At 2, it's the Eagles. I want to believe in this Eagles team, but that guy in the picture right there, Jalen Hurts, still in concussion protocol. If he is still in concussion protocol, we are getting, most likely, Tanner McKee. Not who you want in a playoff game against a really good Packers team. Right? There's no weak spots in the NFC. There's nowhere to hide, even as the 2 seed going up what usually is an easy game against the 7 seed. They need Jalen Hurts back. They could probably survive without him, but I don't know. Saquon's great. That defense is great, but without Jalen Hurts, this team just lacks that extra oomph, that extra confidence that it needs to really be what it can be. And at number 1, it's the Detroit Lions. Even in a game where Jared Goff looked a little uncomfortable, you had a guy in Jahmyr Gibbs who finished with 4 touchdowns. What a day for him on the ground, and he might be getting his running mate back in the backfield in David Montgomery after a long rest. That is huge for them. They obviously love to have that Thunder and Lightning, Sonic and Knuckles duo over there. It's not something that they need because Jahmyr Gibbs has shown he is a premier back in the NFL, but spelling him, letting him be that extra explosive player that he has, that he can be, and giving that your bigger, more compact back, I guess, your power rusher in David Montgomery a couple of carries at the goal line, spelling him a bit is huge. Take a little wear and tear off his body. The Lions at number 1, they've looked like the best team in the and they could bring a Super Bowl back to Detroit as long as they get healthy. But let me know what you think. Who was the best team in the NFL? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we focus on just the playoff teams. I talked a little bit about it, but there are tiers in the playoffs, right? 14 teams enter. Who are next? Coming up here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 6th. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Enjoyed the snow if you were a part of the winter storm that ran through the country today. In this segment, we finish off our NFL coverage with a little bit of NFL playoff talk, right? The playoffs are officially set. But not all 14 teams are created equal. We'll go over all 14, put them in categories. Top tier, bottom tier. That's coming up in just a second here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 6th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL playoff tiers, right? There are plenty of ways to break this down. We're going to get a little bit creative with it, right? It's not just contenders. It's not just pretenders. There's a couple of in-between tiers there, but we're going to start off simple. I think there are five teams that are true contenders this year in the NFL. And you're going to start off with the usual suspects, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, the team that is looking for the first ever three-peat in the history of the Super Bowl era in the NFL. They are getting hot at the right time. They are a team that is incredibly dangerous, and they're getting lots of rest, almost a month of rest for those starters after sitting out in Week 18. They're getting the equivalent of basically 3 weeks off. That is crazy to me that happens. The Chiefs are firmly in that contending tier. Same with a couple of their AFC rivals, right? You have the Bills led by Josh Allen, and they're always going to be in that contending tier. They took care of business against not just the 1 seed Kansas City Chiefs, but also the 1 seed Detroit Lions. Both 1 seeds in the conference were felled by Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. No one else in football can say that. Now, a couple teams came close, but no other team in football can say that they beat both 15-win teams this season. That is incredibly impressive. Now, there are downsides to the Bills, right? There's downsides to every team, but they are true contenders. They have matched up well against all of these teams, most of these teams in the contending tier, except for one, the Baltimore Ravens, the other AFC true contender. In my opinion, the Baltimore Ravens, led by potential MVP winner Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, who potentially could win the Offensive Player of the Year. The defense that has continued to get better and better as the season has gone on. They absolutely destroyed the Bills. They took care of business against them. No other team in the contending tier has been able to say that they did that, right? This is a Ravens team that when they are on, like they are on right now, the offense is in a groove that I have not seen for a while, that I have not seen really all season out of them. That is an incredibly tough team to beat. They are playing their best football at the most important time, and they are true contenders. Now, getting out of the AFC, there's just 2 teams in the NFC that I see as real contenders. Now, I will say the NFC is much deeper than the AFC. I think you can go 1-7 in the NFC. You can only go about 1-5 in the AFC, in my opinion, and that's where we get to the pretenders, but that's later. The 2 pretenders in the NFC, first of all, it's obviously the 1 seed, the Detroit Lions, finishing at 15 wins on the year. That is an incredible year, right? They set franchise records in just about everything offensively. Wins, points, touchdowns scored, yards per play, and the points per game. At 33.2 points per game, the Lions not only set a franchise record, but have moved into the top 20 all-time. The 17th best offense in the history of the NFL we are seeing with Jared Goff and the 2024 Lions. Ben Johnson builds an incredible game plan every time. They get a week off to rest, which is maybe the most important thing, right? They're dealing with the most injuries in all of the NFL to the most key players, right? They're most likely going to get David Montgomery back. They got Alex Anzalone back ahead of the Sunday Night Football game that took place almost 24 hours ago, right? That was a massive, massive deal. You saw how much that affected the Lions' defense as a whole, getting a guy like Anzalone back. They could get a couple of pass rushers back later in the playoffs, which they have sorely needed, sorely missed ever since Aiden Hutchinson and a couple of other guys went down. Now, they're not going to get all of them back, but getting even just a couple of reinforcements is going to be huge, and the Lions are clearly in that contender tier. And the final team in that top contender tier, it's the Eagles. We talked about them in our power ranking segment, but to go over it very quickly, this is an Eagles team that on paper matches up with every single team in the league and probably beats them. You have the wide receiver core, top 15 receivers in the league, in my opinion. Jalen Hurts, a top 10 quarterback in the league. The offensive line, at least top 3, arguably the best one in the league. That defense, arguably the best defense in all of football. That is a dangerous mix. The only issue is Jalen Hurts in concussion protocol. If he doesn't go, this team is immediately much weaker. And I didn't even mention Saquon Barkley, who's legitimately in MVP talks. What he did this season was incredible. Those are the 5 contenders: the Eagles, the Lions, the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. Now we get into the mid tiers, right? There's 3 tiers how I broke up the middle tier of teams, right? These aren't teams that I think I've no shot to win it, but these are teams that, they're going to need a couple breaks to go their way. They're clearly in a tier below those top 5, and I'm going to start with a tier that I'm calling dangerous if hot, right? The Buccaneers and the Rams are the 2 teams I am putting in this tier. The Rams, obviously, we talked a little bit about. They've started off their season 1-4. They rested all their guys in the last game, which means they finished off the year at 9-2. That is incredible. That is an incredible stretch down the back half of the season. They've hit on everything. Since Puka came back, he has been insane. Matthew Stafford has been amazing to watch, and that defense, led by a couple of rookies, Florida State guys, Braden Fisk, and potential defensive rookie of the year coming out of that defense as well, right? This is a really good Rams team, and they can compete with just about anyone. We saw them go toe-to-toe with the MVP performance of Josh Allen, probably the defining moment of his season, when he was able to take down those Rams in that 44-41 game, right? That was a massive, massive moment for him. The Rams, they stuck around. There are plenty of issues with them. They're not always super consistent, but 9-2 over the last stretch. They're hot, and they not someone that you want to face if you're any of those contending teams. And you can say the same thing for the Bucs, right? They have laid goose eggs plenty of times, but they also played the Chiefs to overtime. They also beat the Lions. They also played a lot of really good football, dropped 40 points multiple times this season. This is a team that is very dangerous if you let them stay in the game and you let that offense really get going. The emergence of Bucky Irving in that run game has added a huge boost for Baker Mayfield, who threw 40 touchdowns this season. Pretty good. He has his turnover issues, but those 2 teams, the Bucs and the Rams, they're dangerous if you let them get hot. Getting into the next tier, right? These are teams that I think could conceivably do it, right? They're not in that kind of dark horse range like the Rams and the Bucs are, but these are teams that are still clearly a step below the top contenders, right? The Vikings, the Commanders, and the Packers fall in this tier, right? The reason I put the Vikings in here as opposed to the top tier is because of what we just saw against the Lions. And my big concern with them is, how does Sam Darnold handle that extra pressure that is the playoffs? I'm not sure how he's going to do it. He wasn't able to stand up against the pressure in the Lions game. I don't know how it's going to go when they go and take on a team like the Rams, who are very dangerous, as we talked about earlier. The Commanders, very young team. I want to believe in this team. They don't have the talent on the outside or the defense, especially in the secondary, to deal with some of these teams in the playoffs that are just going to absolutely shred them. The Bucs, they could have a huge day offensively. Now, Jaden Daniels can keep up with them offensively, but it's not going to be their kind of game, and I'm just a little bit worried about how they match up with some of these teams in the playoffs. And finally, the Packers. Their struggle against playoff teams is well known. They lost to the Eagles week 1. They lost twice to the Lions. They lost twice to the Vikings, right? Those are 5 of their losses. They also lost to the Bears at the end of the season when they were trying, right? They are 0-5 against playoff teams. It's just not good for them. They're 0-5 against those top contenders, right? They need to go out and they need to prove they can beat a top team. They have the roster to do it. They have the quarterback to do it. They have the defense to do it, but they just haven't put it on film yet, and that's why they're just on the outside looking in of contenders. And the final middle tier that I want to talk about is, I'm going to say, it's matchup dependent. You have the Denver Broncos led by Bo Nix and the Los Angeles Chargers led by Justin Herbert. Now, I love Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is a top 5 quarterback for me. Bo Nix, a guy I don't really believe in that much, but that defense for both of these teams is real. Now, we've seen them struggle against a couple of teams when they really got put to work, right? Those defenses aren't invincible, but They are things they can lean on. If they're able to stay close and have a good matchup against the opposing team's offense or the opposing team's defense, they've got a shot. But it's just not a team that I'm really relying on, leaning on super heavy and saying they're going to make a dark horse run. They just don't quite have enough pieces, especially offensively, to get the job done. And that leads us to the pretenders. There are just two teams left. It's the Steelers and the Texans. And I don't like putting the Steelers in the pretender tier, but they just have really struggled down the stretch, right? They've lost 4 straight games, granted against some pretty solid teams, 3 playoff teams and the Cincinnati Bengals, who were on a run there, but the offense has been really, really concerning to me, right? They need to be able to get some offense going. George Pickens just had maybe his worst game of his career, 1 catch for 0 yards on 6 targets. Him and Russell Wilson, ever since he came back from injury, have been unable to link up, and for him being such a huge part of that offense, they need to figure it out fast. And finally, the Texans. They're limping their way into the playoffs like nobody else is. They win their division, but they are coming in and looking like just the old man in the playoffs. Now, I know they're young, but they just don't really have a shot to me. They're pretenders right now, and they came in as that kind of dangerous if hot team last year, but everything has kind of gone wrong. The offensive line has gone completely downhill, and I just don't see it happening this year. The Texans are in my pretenders. But let me know what you think. What are your playoff tiers? When we come back, MLB free agency. Lots of big news has come and gone. There are a couple of big guys still on the market. We're going to take a look at 5 guys that are still there, talk about where they might go, and why I think they'll go there. By GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 6th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over a lot of NFL stuff. We went over the tiers in the playoffs. We went over the power rankings. We went over Black Monday, and we went over Tyreek Hill. In this segment, we finish off our show with a little bit of a focus on baseball. The MLB is about to get back into it. I can't believe the offseason is almost over, just about a month until pitchers and catchers report, but there are still a couple of massive players still unsigned. Some international, some just looking to find a team after a huge year last season. We'll talk about all those guys, 5 of them I have to talk about here today, coming up in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a snowy Monday, January 6th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into our final segment of the day. Talk a little bit of baseball. It's been a bit since we covered some baseball. I believe the last thing we talked about was Juan Soto, and there's plenty of huge contracts that got handed out. We had a lot of first baseman movement. We had a couple of starting pitchers get moved, but there are a couple of guys that are still on the market that I would like to focus on today, and we're going to start off with the big international free agent, that being Roki Sasaki. Right? Sasaki has been rumored to a lot of different places. The phenom pitcher coming out of Japan is a guy that's not going to get that huge, massive contract that a lot of these other prospects coming out of the international circuit are going to get because he's coming a little bit early. So he's not eligible to get those massive contracts that, for instance, a guy like Shohei Ohtani got. But there are still a lot of teams that are looking to get him. And at the price tag, should be about 30 teams that are in the market for him because he is someone that could be absolutely devastating. The teams that are always in the market for guys out of Japan, you have the Padres. Obviously, Yu Darvish being there, he was one of those guys that got a huge contract. He's someone that could convince people to come over. The Dodgers, they have Shohei Ohtani. Could convince people to come over, and the Mariners. Those three are always in it. The Mariners, of course, because they have Ichiro, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, legend in Seattle. He's kind of the face of that franchise. So those three are always in it, but there's a couple of other suitors that I think are worth talking about. First of all, the Yankees. They're going to go out and dish out that money. They're a team that could use some starting pitching, as well as, again, with every one of these pitchers, and I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen. I'm not sure if it really is because it doesn't seem like they're in on a lot of these guys, but every single starting pitcher that's on the market, every single elite starting pitcher that's on the market, I want to see the Orioles name attached in rumors to them because this is an Orioles team that is so close. This Orioles team is so talented. They just don't quite have that starting pitching caliber. They lose Corbin Burns. He walks, goes to the Diamondbacks. That was by far their best pitcher. They don't have the weapons behind him. They've got Grayson Rodriguez, who's fine, but he's not a true one. They need to go out. They need to get a couple of these guys. Sasaki is a guy that I would put a lot of resources into if I'm the Orioles, but I don't really see it going that way. I see Sasaki staying on the West Coast, going to one of those teams that already has a kind of Japanese foothold. It's hard to go halfway around the world, right? Not know anybody, not really have a lot of people that speak your language, which is why you see these kind of California and West Coast hubs that have that connection to former or current baseball players there, going to a lot of these places. The Mariners are a team that I think should make a huge push for him. The Padres, I think, will make a good push, and I think at the end of the day, he's going to end up with the Mariners. What they have in their pitching staff is as close as they're going to get to him. I think he wants to stay in a smaller market, so honestly, I do think it's between them and the Padres, but I think at the end of the day, they're going to end up going with the Mariners for Sasaki. That's someone to keep an eye on. Next up, Bregman. Alex Bregman, one of the premier third basemen on the market, and this is a third baseman that turned down a lot of money to stay with the Astros. There's a lot of teams that need third baseman, right? One of those teams that needs a third baseman that screams out to me about Alex Bregman is the Washington Nationals. Now, as a Nationals fan, I don't necessarily want Alex Bregman to come in. I don't think he fits the timeline, but right now they have maybe the worst third base situation in the league. They also have a lot of money to work with. They didn't attempt to go out and get really one of those big free agents. They have one of the lowest payrolls in the entire league. They can go out and get a guy like Alex Bregman. Give him the term, give him money. Let him go play DH eventually when you call up a guy like Brady House to go play third base. That's someone that I think the Nats could and might target because they have a lot of money left over as they head towards the end of the offseason. Anthony Santander. He just is coming off his huge power season with the O's. The O's already replaced him. They went out and they got Tyler O'Neill, so a reunion seems a little bit unlikely. There are plenty of teams that could use power, whether it be the Blue Jays. They need another guy that can hit. They've got a lot of defense, but a guy that can hit would be huge for them. That's one that I've seen a lot. The Red Sox, they could always use another power bat there. Everyone could always use another power bat. The Yankees are a team that I think could be interesting, especially with the departure of Juan Soto. He's not going to be nearly as good as Juan Soto is, but being able to fill that empty spot, that power spot that Juan Soto had, play a little bit of left field, You can slide Verdugo over to right field if you do decide to re-sign him. But the team that I think is going to end up eventually dishing out the most amount of money for him is the San Francisco Giants, right? They always seem to be in the mix for some of these big guys, but the Giants are a team that just haven't quite landed one yet. Anthony Santander, coming off of a huge season, it's a big ballpark. I'm not sure if it's the best spot for him to go, but Camden Yards, also a pretty big ballpark, and he was just fine over there. I think the San Francisco Giants end up landing the big fish that is Anthony Santander, getting one of the best premier power bats that is out there. The last real first baseman is on the list here. That is Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso, kind of the face of the Mets for a very long time. He is a free agent, and he's not getting the offers he wants. The Mets gave him a low ball offer. That's the last I heard from him, but I can't imagine him anywhere else but the Mets, right? I thought there'd be a lot of teams that kind of chased him. A lot of teams that could have chased him, right? Teams like the Texas Rangers, who traded away Nathaniel Lowe to the Nationals. The Nationals were a team that I thought could go after him. Again, they signed Josh Bell, traded for Nathaniel Lowe. I don't think he's a guy that is really on their radar anymore. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to end up taking a bit of a discount, come back to the Mets, and join Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor as the third of that big three trio that could really wreck the NL if they get him back. And finally, the last one, number 5 on my list, the last one I really wanted to talk about here. There's a lot more big free agents, but Jack Flaherty, traded from the Tigers to the Dodgers, helps them win a ring, helps Shohei Ohtani gets his first ring. He is now a free agent, and there's a lot of different places he could go, right? First of all, a reunion with the Tigers. That's something that's in the card. The Tigers could use him as they look to make a push after they won a playoff series in the last... They won a playoff series last year, right? They go get more pitchers. They add that to the back that's behind Tariq Skubal. That's going to be a dangerous 1-2 punch, something that they desperately needed with how they were playing the playoffs. They were really doing a lot of bullpen games, doing a lot. Having a guy like Flaherty back could really help. The Dodgers, always an option. They've continued to spend money. They've signed a lot of pitching already this offseason. There's no reason to believe that they can't bring a guy like Flaherty back, though. And finally, like I have said a million times before, or not finally, like I've said a million times before in this segment, whenever there's a pitcher on the market, I think the O's should go after him. But at the end of the day, I don't think the O's are really going to chase him. I don't think the Orioles are really going to chase a pitcher, which is dumb. They're going to mismanage this team. But a team like the Braves that has lost Max Fried, has lost Charlie Morton, they're a team that I could go and see Jack Flaherty getting a big chunk of change from and heading down to Atlanta, being successful on the Braves. That's where I think they end up. Jack Flaherty to the Braves, Pete Alonso to the Mets, Anthony Santander to the Giants, Alex Bregman to the Nationals, and Roki Sasaki to the Mariners. Love to hear your thoughts on any of this, but thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be back tomorrow talking everything that's going on in the world of sports. A little bit less football. We will do some more playoff football coverage. We'll talk about the college football playoffs. We'll talk about the FBS play or the FCS playoffs that are currently going on between North Dakota State and Montana.